That's awesome. That's a great point. The we should talk about the Complex article.
Yeah.
The because they had this big thing where it was like for the first time in 30 years, no hip hop album has been number one, and the tone of it was very much like one of those old baseball movies where the old baseball player takes off his hat, waves it at the crowd, and it's like, it's been the luckiest man in the world, and then he goes retires. That's like, it's a very silly thing. But I people have been asking me about it, and I have my own stance on where things are. I put it in the breakdown, and I was going to read that as a prompt. My take is when discussing the sales success of a musical form, we are discussing its cumulative health, which has to be a mixture of popular and underground. So underground indie has a role to play. That's to push the creative envelope, right? Provide new ways to create that the popular artists can ultimately borrow from, water down a bit. The popular space has a job just as difficult, namely to galvanize the world. At its best, popular rap speaks to generations around the world. As talented as folks like Babytron or Young Boy Never Broke Again are, your mother doesn't care about them any more than Ka or Billy Woods. In my opinion, hip hop subgenred itself out of the spotlight. Drill has drilled itself so deeply into itself that you need a tour guide to find it. Griselda is making music sampling the same sounds in the same song structure to fans who just love that sound and song structure. The worlds are so separate they don't touch, intermingle, or generate community or financial impact. The limited vinyl drop exclusivity game has an overall narrowing effect on who knows who and who cares about it. So, I mean, you can see this just all up and down the line, right? Like, I remember Lloyd Banks dropped an album this year. I'll just never forget it, man, because there were a couple people who were like, album of the year, no problem, it's done. And I was giggling like, no one's gonna even remember this came out, dog. But no one's gonna even remember this happened. Like, because Lloyd Banks exists on such a narrow spectrum of the universe that you're fooling yourself. If you think a lot of people are even going to remember it came out.
You mind if I jump in?
No, go ahead.
I think there are some contending factors to think about here. To touch on what we were talking about earlier about like rock kind of falling out of favor and hip hop coming to dominance. I mean, part of it is a change in the culture. Part of it is kind of like the spread of hip hop. It kind of happened a little later than rock, so it took a lot longer to spread to the mainstream. But also the way record sales were counted was different. Somewhere in the 90s, a system called SoundScan was enabled at record stores that counted every record sold. It used to be kind of averages and what the record companies themselves reported, and that was the way Billboard gathered the numbers. But they came up with the SoundScan system in the 90s, and then it turned out that even though rock records were the most played on radio and the most requested, there were all these hip hop and R&B and soul records that weren't being counted because the white reviewers and white editors of Billboard didn't give a shit about that stuff. So that's part of the change. But with hip hop becoming more dominant, then it started to climb up radio a lot more, and it was like a cumulative effect on itself there. But I feel like what you're seeing now with like Complex kind of crying about hip hop not being number one, part of it is they're called Complex Hip Hop Magazine. And part of it is like making people click on stuff like, oh no, is hip hop over? Is it done? Can they not make rap
Right.
anymore? They like that stuff. But I think that it overlooks that hip hop has matured into having like a real overground and a real underground, where there was a lot more commingling and a lot more people coming up from the underground to the overground earlier in hip hop. I feel like it's been stratified a lot more because
Yep.
like once you make it from the underground to the overground, some people never look back and never want to associate with the underground anymore and start doing celebrity shit and endorsement deals and appearing on other people's albums. So it has that like rolling effect where the two scenes kind of diverge from each other. So I think that that's a big part of it. But, you know, much in the way we changed the way we counted records with SoundScan, the way we count records with streaming and streaming sales is real different. And that's really impacted kind of the I guess you'd call it like the balkanization of the charts. It's no longer just like top 10. It's like
Right.
hot country, hot urban, adult contemporary, you know, fast movers, you know, metal. There isn't like the overall top 10 chart is such a melting together of that stuff that it doesn't make sense. You can't really tell what trends are. So hip hop not getting a number one on there to me is really almost meaningless, and it almost supports the idea that hip hop is like a mainstream form and here to stay.
How do you feel, Kay?
I mean, I think, you know, we've been discussing this for like years now, and to me, I think what really stands out is that, I mean, what was I'll ask you guys, what was the last, I guess could say important hip hop record from the mainstream that you've recognized, that you would recognize in like the last couple of years? That came, and I would say, and I let me add a caveat to it, came from someone new, came from like a fresh source.
Um,
So,
it's
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So here's my problem, Kay, and here's my problem with the article, right?
Okay.
Morgan Wallen has dominated a lot of 2023, right?
Yeah.
But the first few months of the year were completely dominated by SZA's album.
Yeah.
Now,
Mhm.
wait, what is SZA's label?
Top Dog.
Right. That's a rap label. Like formed by people from Compton, right? Like is legitimately like so. Yes,
But
it's a rap album. SOS is not a rap album, but
no,
it certainly is. It is within the family of hip hop, right? It is.
I mean,
Yeah.
but our R&B has really, I mean, SZA, I would consider SZA to be R&B.
Yep.
But R&B has kind of transformed into pop in a lot of ways.
Yep.
As in, I mean, the fine line between, like, you look at like a Ariana Grande, SZA, Doja at times.
Right.
That's all in it. Yes, it's influenced by hip hop, but it's also pop.
Yeah. There's people on my list. We will see who can rap and sing at a point at a high level at both ends where it's you're like, what kind of album is this, right? And that's okay. Like that's where we are, right? We're stretching boundaries and all that. But like to the point that Mr. Burns brought up is how what my mind goes is how much does it matter to be number one at this point? Since the streaming numbers are the streaming numbers and you're getting fractions of a penny, right? You remember when we talked about this when Little Uzi Vert took over the world, right?
Yeah.
With Extra and that was an incredible album, right? And that was a young face, and that was someone we were all happy about at that time. And I remember they like 30 billion streams or whatever. And he made like, $6 million. I'm like, really? So back in the day, when you sold 1,000,000 copies, that meant you sold 1,000,000 copies of something for $13 or $15, right?
Mhm.
And that was like, boom, there's literally money translation, there's points on that.
Right.
There's some finer points to that.
Right.
Usually for those records, an artist would be paid in advance for the studio.
Yep.
They would have to pay back that advance, but it
Oh,
would
yeah.
only be paid back at about a nickel per copy.
Right.
They also had to pay for like the breakage and the distribution. So most mainstream albums that were big enough to have national distribution, the artist was in a huge hole right
Right.
out of the gate. And a
Right.
lot never even filled it. A lot of famous people never even filled the hole.
No, but that, and I wasn't trying to say that the artists were living it up. I was, the industry had real fuel behind it. That's why you had $1 million videos.
Yeah, the record company made a lot of money off
Right.
the record.
They-
Artist, not so much.
And that's why you got advances and cool stuff. That, I think at this point, indie hip hop is much more into where's the actual money, right? Like, you remember Chance, when Chance took over the world, they asked him, like, where did you make all your money? He's like, I made it on this 3-hat. Like,
Mhm.
3-hat made him millions of dollars. He didn't make it off the music. So how important is it to be number one? It's still important, but it's probably the least important it's ever been.
I mean, I think it's more important to cultivate an audience that likes what you do and is going to follow you where you go than to be the top of everyone. You can't please all the people all the time. And if you do, like McDonald's sells the most hamburgers, those are not the best hamburgers,
And Rock Marciano's never really charted, right? Like, not in any
He doesn't
big
have
way.
to. I mean,
Right.
that guy will be able to make records the rest of his life with his built-in audience because he cultivated a sound and people go to him for like a real particular thing.
And he sells products exclusively, and he makes money that way. And so, like, and touring and all that. So, like, I don't know. It's just, it doesn't, being number one is the least important it's ever been.
The numbers are less relevant than they ever
Yeah.
were.
I mean, to me, there's a clear distinction nowadays between, and maybe this is how rock evolved as well. There's a clear distinction between the art and the commerce. So maybe the business model of mainstream hip hop is broken. But I mean, I think in terms of as a genre, in terms of as an art, I think hip hop is in a great place.
Right. If they cared so fucking much about who was number one and praising success, they'd all be talking about Karol G or fucking Bad Bunny, who are killing shit, but they're not because those people speak Spanish, right? So don't get it fucking twisted. The people that are writing these articles about the fall of hip hop are specifically ignoring Karol G, Bad Bunny, and Spanish speaking artists. They can't wait for hip hop to fall so they can replace it with something a little less black.
I mean, I do think country is on the come up. I've been hearing a lot of rumbling about from a lot of different sources, or I should say people, regarding the appeal of country music.
Yeah,
So
I agree 1,000% with that. Newer country has started to integrate a lot more of like urban production techniques. There's a lot more obvious auto tune going on. The drum patterns have changed a lot. Like country kick drums are fucking huge now, and you used to never be able to hear that shit. And they're doing stuff on the downbeat. They have like boom bap beats under country stuff now. And then you get like a Lil Nas X. Like to me, the music sonically is not my bag up my alley at all. It's a mass of too many things, but the way he disrupted the country world and made them look at him and what he was doing, he really opened up the forum for people to do some weird shit with it. I don't like how any of it sounds, but I cheer them on, and I think it's great that they're doing it because that Nashville world has been real like antiseptic and corporate for a long time. To
Oh,
see
yeah.
it get shaken up a little bit is kind of cool. I hope that some cool underground stuff comes out of it.
The perfect description of the Nashville effect of it. I would also add to that, Kay, the Musgraves effect, right?
Yeah.
Like Musgraves was so important that she influenced one of the most interesting Vampire Weekend albums I heard, right? I love that album.
Mhm.
And that album's all like post Musgraves, like trying to capture the warmth and richness of her kind of country. Yeah.
Yeah, well, she opened a studio after hitting it big and stuff. I actually
Right.
recorded drums there for a metal record of all things. But
That's awesome.
you know, that was someone who begat their success for like other musicians to take advantage of, really paid it back, and someone who is seemingly like real mainstream and antiseptic, but so much crazy underground stuff has come out of there.
Yep. And she's done songs in Spanish. She's done like really wild choices. She's challenged herself, which is, to me, that's it, right? That's the success mark. I don't care if you're pop or underground. I want you to be someone who's good at growing, and someone I can trust. Yeah.
Well, someone who like challenges kind of accepted norms. I mean, that was my thing with Lil Nas X, was just like anything that gets old white people that pissed is fundamentally good.
Yep.
And like bringing like Satan and dick riding to the old Grand Ole Opry, that was a ballsy move.
Very, very.